Hey guys, it is time for my January wrap up. And I did really great this month. I had 19 items on my TBR and I read 16 of them, which is just bananas. I am so proud of myself. With that, my physical TBR shelf is now down to 77. So I am off to a great start with getting the number of books on my shelves down. So hopefully we can continue with that. But that being said, since I do have 16 items to get through in this video, let's just jump right in and talk about Steampunk Holmes, Legacy of the Nautilus by P.C. Martin. This was very disappointing. It is supposed to be obviously a Sherlock Holmes book, and with steampunk elements to it. The part of the plans to the Nautilus, which is oh my goodness, what is it from? Captain Nemo's. It's Captain Nemo's Nautilus plans. They have been stolen, and so of course Sherlock Holmes is the only person that can track it down. It does have Victorian language, which I don't love, but I'm sure that it has to do with it's an homage to the original Sherlock Holmes. Now I have not read the original Sherlock Holmes, so what I'm about to say, take with a grain of salt. It might be also in tribute to the originals. But one thing I really did not appreciate is that we would go into the investigations with Holmes. We would see what he was doing. But the author was very clearly leaving a lot of the information out that Holmes was picking up on. So there was absolutely no way for us to solve the mystery alongside of Holmes. Because and part of that I'm sure is to preserve this mystery that he is the smartest man, because if the readers can solve it, then he's not the smartest guy, right? But I really didn't like it because then we'd get to his explanations, and his explanations are literally half of this book. And I was just like, well, of course you seem so smart when you are the one with all the information. Oh my goodness. I did not like that. I did not like being told about, I didn't like being told about his conclusions, like he's the smartest guy. Anyway, whatever. But this is also very clearly a setup to a series that just never happened. None of the characters were fleshed out. The steampunk elements seem to be shoved in very poorly. So it's not, all around, just not a really great book. After that, I did read How to Train Your Dragon by Cressida Cowell, the first book in the How to Train Your Dragon series. This is an elementary school series, which follows Hiccup Horrendous Haddock III as he chooses a dragon and tries to train it. And of course, Hiccup is not like the rest of his tribe. The majority of his tribe is very physically fit and maybe lacking in the brains department. And he is definitely like the small, skinny kid who is more or less all brains. And it was fun. I really understand why so many kids like this. I understand why it was picked up to be a movie. I don't generally read elementary school books because it is very simplistic, but I did find it to be enjoyable for what it was. After that, I read Daredevil, Dr. Husband by Alison Roberts, and I did not like this. First of all, the title is misleading. He's not a daredevil. We have seen nothing that would put him into the daredevil category. I guess he's a doctor. I would call him a paramedic, and then I'm sure he'll end up being a husband, but whatever. Small quibble. But it was not a good romance. It was just super unbelievable. There was no chemistry there, and then there was these things that were kind of running through the story that I really didn't appreciate. Like this idea that you have to forgive your family for any wrongs that they do against you because they're your family. I'm like, you know what? If your family did horrendous stuff to you and you choose to forgive them, that's your choice. But you shouldn't feel obligated to. So I really didn't like that. There's this idea that you should or do give your all to just one marriage, and once that marriage ends, whether in divorce or death or whatever, then you're spent. You're never going to have another relationship again, which I'm like, oh, I don't believe that either. Soulmates is not a thing that I think exists. I did not like this guy because he was accused of some pretty horrendous things that our protagonist was like, I'm sure that I've met him and I don't think he really did that. Okay, that's your fine. But at the end, after they had known each other for about a month, she was presented with some evidence that said maybe he did do it. And she doubted for a moment, and the dude was just like, I'm out. I'm done with this relationship because you doubted me. I was like, are you kidding me? That's the problem they have to overcome? I walk out the door, don't care. Like, if you're going to be that guy, don't care. But the thing that tipped the scales into I actively dislike this, and I don't know if I'm going to read anything by this author ever again, is how mental illness was portrayed, in that there was a character who was mentally ill and everybody was just kind of like, well, of course she's a liar. Why did you believe her? And I was like, oh, absolutely not. You do not get to write things into your books that contribute to people's opinions that actively harm people in real life. I am out. So, did not appreciate that book at all. After that, I did read The Wicked and the Divine, volumes 3 and 4 by Kieron Gillen. It is a graphic novel series, and essentially every 90 years, 12 gods come down, take over the bodies of some 12 individuals, and they are loved, they are hated. In 2 years, they're all dead. They are the ultimate pop stars, and this is the ultimate soap opera series. These 2 volumes were actually a reread for me, but I don't actually remember much of anything, so it was kind of like it was new. There were a couple of really weird turns throughout it, but nothing that really gave me real pause where I was like, what am I reading here? It was interesting. They were weird turns that were still interesting, and I had no problem kind of continuing on. The thing that really caused me the most issue was just that they kept switching artists, especially in volume 3. Every single issue was a different artist, and I just really struggle with that. But I'm hopeful that it will kind of even out and have the same artist for a while. At the end of volume 4, there was this huge twist that I do not remember, and now there's so many different interesting ways we can go, and I'm so stoked to see how this story plays out. After that, I did read Rosemary and Brew by Seanan McGuire, the first book in the October Day series. This is for my giant reread of this entire series, and it was a little rough. I did do a full review, so I'll link that up above and down below, but it was very rough. And what I will say is that it's a debut novel, so it's understandable why it's rough. And there, in between moments of not great stuff, you do get to see little glimmers of what Seanan McGuire will become as a writer. And that was really cool to see. However, a lot of the story is not super unique. The world building, okay, so here's the thing. When it came out, it was very different than what was out there. But now it's not. If you come to this now, it's not going to feel that unique. And I recognize that if I had started reading this series now, I don't know that I would have continued, because it just doesn't, it feels kind of like everything else. I will say, however, if you do keep on with this series, one of the things it does really well is that urban fantasies kind of show a lot of potential for these really cool worlds and characters and everything, and most do not live up to it, but this series does. So if you can hang in there, it does get better. Although I do understand if you're like, I don't want to wait 3 or 4 books for it to get good. After that, I did read All Systems Red and Artificial Condition by Martha Wells. This is novellas 1 and 2 in the Bot Diaries. This is my favorite science fiction series, so this is a gigantic reread, but it was really good. We're following our main character of Murderbot, who is a construct, essentially a robot who has been given some human parts. They are a security unit, and they go with scientists to these planets and just try to keep them alive. And in this, and then they just, Murderbot really just wants to kind of do a mediocre version of their job and then go sit in their compartment and watch their stories. In this first book, Murderbot kind of has to decide, am I willing to put in the work to actually keep my people safe, because it has suddenly gotten very, very dangerous. And in this second book, Murderbot is on a quest to fill in some gaps in its memory, because they are hopeful that it will kind of help them understand who they are and where they came from. Very, very good. Also very quick reads. They're only 150 pages and they just really move. After that, I did read Come Tumbling Down by Seanan McGuire, the 5th book in the Wayward Children series. And this was a very pleasant surprise, mostly because my expectations were incorrect, and that was my bad. It is an adventure story, which I did not realize. It follows the Wolcott twins, and that's about all I can say without spoiling the rest of the series. But the last Wolcott twins book was just like heartbreak. It was so hard to read, and I thought that was going to be this, and no, it was an adventure, so we really didn't have time for backstory or anything like that. So we didn't have time for that heartbreaking kind of stuff. I did think that the pacing was great. The writing in this one is a little bit less lyrical than it has been in other books in this series, but that makes a lot of sense considering that this is an adventure story. I think that the resolution was very good, and I do think that things are more or less resolved with the Wolcott twins. I don't know that we're going to see them anymore in this particular series, which is fine by me. They are not my favorite characters, but they're good. They're just not my favorite. But there you go. After that, I did read Lock-In by John Scalzi. This is a futuristic world where a disease just ran rampant, and some people ended up with a weird symptom where they are locked into their body. Essentially, their mind is active. They can't do anything physical. A ton of money has been poured into research, and so now a lot of them have neural nets placed in their brains, and they can control robots and then interact with the world. Our main character is Chris Shane, and they are one of these locked-in individuals. They are also an FBI agent, and their partner is Leslie Van, and they are called to solve a murder mystery involving some people related to this particular disease. This was very, very good. John Scalzi is called, a lot of his books are called gateway sci-fi, and I completely agree. It is very easy writing. There is science in it. It is very definitely science fiction. But he never gets so wrapped up in the joy of the science that he starts leaving individuals behind who are maybe not as interested in the intricate details of the science. So it's not necessarily science light, it's science explanation light. What he does explain does fit together, but it's not an overwhelming amount. The plot is good. The pacing is great. Chris as a character is not particularly well developed, and neither is Leslie. But that's kind of what I've found so far from what I've read from John Scalzi, is that the characters are not ever super developed. I like the mystery. It was not super simple, but it was simple enough for me to follow. So if you're really into murder mysteries, it might be very simple to you. But for me, it was great. But this was a very enjoyable read. I'm very excited to read the next one. After that, I read In the Shadow of Spindrift House by Mira Grant. This is a pen name for Seanan McGuire. And this is a horror novella. It follows our main character of Harlow Upton Jones, and she is part of a teenage detective agency that is about to disband because they're no longer teenagers. And so she kind of is just like, one more mystery, guys. Let's just figure out what's going on with Spindrift House. And they go, and it kind of goes from there. It is a horror. The writing is a bit lyrical. It's very atmospheric. I think that that's supposed to lend to this air of creepiness. I don't know how successful it was, because what I am finding is I don't get creeped out by books. and I don't get scared from books. And so I'm not a great judge of whether this is actually creepy or not. And so I couldn't tell you. The plot was not super intricate. The characters weren't super intricate, and that's mostly because it's a novella. She does not have the time or space to do so. I liked it. I did like it well enough. I guessed the ending, but that's mostly because I've read a lot of her works, and so I kind of knew. But I'm interested to reread it and see if I like it better the second time around. After that, I read This Is How You Lose the Time War by Amal El-Mohtar and Max Gladstone. This is a beautiful romance, but it's essentially following our two main characters who are time traveling agents for rival and mutually exclusive future timelines. So their job is to go into the past and change the past to better improve the odds that their timeline is going to win. And they leave notes for each other on the battlefield, and they end up falling in love, and it is beautiful. The writing is so great. Every time I pick this up, I just fell right into this story. I really like how they structured each chapter. I thought the ending was a little bit complex, and I wasn't really prepared for that. But I think that on a reread, it'll make a lot more sense, and I'm gonna reread this anyway because I loved it so much. The only quibble I had was that it wasn't super clear why they fell into love. I think it was mostly inferred that they kind of like fell in love with the challenge and the other person's mind and how they work, and that they have essentially found their equal. I think that was supposed to be what it is, but I'm not sure because it wasn't explicit, and I could have used a little bit of explicit. But honestly, it's such a small quibble, and I just loved everything else about this novella. Very, very good. After that, I read Heroine Complex by Sarah Kuhn. This is a story that follows our main character of it follows Aveda Jupiter as the San Francisco superhero and her assistant Evie Tanaka, who is our main character. And I mean, there's this like whole plot that involves like portals opening up and demons coming through and all this kind of stuff, but really this is Evie coming into her own. She is asked to fill in for, like, pose as her boss one night, and then it comes out that Evie has her own superpowers, and she has to kind of decide what to do. Like I said, she's coming into her own. She's deciding who she wants to be as a person and really growing and learning. And as such, even though there is a decent sized cast of characters, the only two really well developed characters are Evie and Aveda. And Aveda is a bit of an antagonist in this story. I really liked this. There was a couple of like it's a debut novel, and there's a couple of debut novel-y kind of issues. And then of course it's super tropey, which is about what you would expect from a superhero book, and it really didn't bother me. I liked that the main characters were Asian American. I liked that the cast of characters was like overwhelmingly female. It was very nice to read. I will continue with the series. I'm very excited to continue with this series. So overall, very good. After that, I read Pocket Apocalypse by Seanan McGuire, the fourth book in the Encrypted series, and this I did not love. Let's start with the good. The plot was really interesting. Essentially, we're following Alex as he goes to Australia to kind of deal with the werewolf situation there, because Australia, it has not ever had to deal with werewolves, so they needed to import an expert. And you guys, the plot was really interesting. The science explanations were spot on. It was so interesting to read those science explanations. How the werewolfism spread was also incredibly interesting. The world building is getting really great. The pacing was great. I don't love Alex and I don't love Shelby, and those are our two main characters. Additionally, most of our side characters were Shelby's family, and I didn't like any of them either. And it was like my feelings ranged from indifferent to actively dislike. So I had no characters to hold on to, and I'm finding more and more, that is a problem for me. This is the only thing about this series that I really struggle with, is I don't like the main characters. And in this one, again, I don't like the side characters either. There was only one character in this whole thing that I actually enjoyed, and that was Basil. He was great. I wish there was more of him. It would have been so much better. It was probably about 3.75 stars, so I have liked this book the least out of the entire series, but it's still really solid. I just struggle with the characters. After that, I attempted to read The Paper Magician by Charlie N. Holmberg. In this book, we are following our main character, Seanan Twill. She has gone to school to learn the theory of magic, and now she is ready to be apprenticed and actually learn how to do the magic. And she is apprenticed to a paper magician, and she is incredibly unhappy about that. Essentially, you are apprenticed to a particular material, and she did not want paper, and once you are bonded with that material, you cannot do magic with anything else. So she is so unhappy, and it shows. In that first chapter, she is just a brat, and we get to the second chapter, and she's like, it's so honestly totally different. It's like she's still a brat, but then she's also like, but teach me all the things, because if I have to be here, I might as well learn. And then by the third one, it is full-blown romance, which is this is a romance book. And it was just such like it was such whiplash, honestly. I was like not happy with it. There were a couple of issues that I had plot-wise, but honestly, why I put this down is because it kind of fell into this thing that I hate that some people do, where they have this sassy, strong, independent female character who falls for the first person who is nice to her, and then ends up doing things to kind of, and all of those things end up putting them into some very stereotypical gender roles. And I just hated it. It's like, seriously? And to me, it's almost lazy writing, because you add one line and it would have been fine. One line to explain motivation. Anyway, whatever. I did not enjoy this. I put it down after 46 pages. It is the only DNF that I had this month, though. After that, I read How To by Randall Munroe, Absurd Scientific Advice for Common Real-World Problems. I struggled a little bit with the first two chapters because I just wasn't that interested in the topic, but after that, I got into it, and it was lovely. I love Randall Munroe's sense of whimsy as he takes these ridiculous questions and just sciences his way through it. He clearly loves science. He very clearly believes that science can answer all these silly questions, and then proceeds to do it. And I love how much fun it is. And so it's things like how to build a lava moat, right? Like, you're just like, you would never do this, but okay, yeah, let's do that. How would you do it? So I enjoyed this a lot. It's not my favorite Randall Munroe book. I like What If better, but this is a very good number 2 from him. And that is all the books that I read in the month of January. We made it through, guys. Let me know down below, what did you read in the month of January? Did any of these books look interesting? Let me know down in the comments, and that's it. So until next time, guys, have happy reading, and I will see you in the next video. Bye.